Boom, we're live.
And we're live. And here we are, Steph and Jess at it again.
Yeah.
For those of you that are listening or are going to come on and listen, I'm Steph Brown from Intelligent Construction Opportunities. I've got the one and only great Jesse Hernandez, the depth builder that he is, going deep and going wide.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Jesse and I have had a number of conversations offline, and what kept coming up was this notion of silos. What is a silo, and why do we all find ourselves in silos, no matter what job and perspective and part of the construction value chain you're a part of? We are all in some kind of silo. But then Jesse and I started talking about a very kind of, I'll say, the cloud of the silo. I'll call it like a dark cloud that sort of follows around different parts of the construction industry. So, Jess, you want to kind of pick it up and talk about what we were just riffing on before we went live?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I know for sure is this silo conversation is an enormous conversation, just because of, we'll say, the range of silos that currently exist. And as the folks out there in the Omniverse jump in and share their insights, for me, my focus, what I'm really spending a lot of time and attention to, like, understand and evaluate and maybe even help people with, is, sure, there are systemic silos. There are barriers between positions, between education, between occupation, between gender, between age, like all of these things. But we can overcome that, right? We can demo, as an individual, I can demo that divide if I shift my thinking. And so one example, kind of like we were talking about a little while ago, is I came up as a plumber. When I was a plumber, the thing that I was valued for was installing stuff, period. Like at work, it was because I could install stuff fast. My social networks outside of work, they like, oh, I know a plumber. It's good to know a plumber for whenever I'm in whenever I need a damn plumber, right? Somebody I can trust and all that stuff. What wasn't appreciated or apparent that I also contained with some level of intellect and thought about bigger things. And so I remember a period of time, and this was my own silo. And so when we think about silos, we're thinking about a structure that is built to separate or contain. Like, simple. That's it. It's a structure that separates or contains something, and almost all the time does both. And so for me, there was a period of time early in my career where my thinking was, nobody respects me, nobody appreciates me, everybody thinks I'm just a dumb plumber. And that was all in, like, I created that barrier between me and other people connecting. That's the barrier or the silo that I have the most influence over to change. Now, there is a truth in that most people didn't understand or aren't even aware of how, we'll just use the word intellectual, craft workers are. And I was just telling you this beforehand, is, when I was out there in the field as an apprentice, there were a few guys, like the journeymen, the old schoolers that were out there at lunchtime and at break, they would be reading books. Because back then, that's all we had. You just had hard books, right? And I'd be like, why are you not reading a book? Like, that's boring. I was 18, 19 years old. And they're like, dude, you got to feed your mind. I'm like, yeah, whatever, right? I'm going to go BS with the guys over there. And so they spent a lot of time, pensive time, like thinking and taking in new ideas. However, they didn't show that to the world. Why? Because as installers, what are you appreciated and validated by? What you install. And there's an external assumption that since you're a craft worker and your grammar sucks, and your spelling's not great, and punctuation and prefixes and suffixes are immaterial to you, that you have zero intelligence. That's another barrier between humans connecting to humans. And so,
But can I stop you? It's not just humans. I'm going to call it out. It is the more formally educated people versus the people that have been educated either directly to learn their trade or indirectly through experience to learn their trade. But I want you right now, because I had a discussion this week also with somebody, I want you to call out all the different schools of education, the topics, the subjects that you would take formally in a formal education setting that are just naturally learned and applied. And we'll start with math, right?
Yes, yes.
That's where I'm going with this. Just
Yeah,
think
yeah.
of all the different go.
So I
Rick.
want to add a little nuance to your observation, because it's not just the formally educated. Because I went to school too. I mean, regular public school, right? K through 12.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did do some community college. I see another layer
Okay.
of separation there, because, and it's from, and I'm going to frame it this way: conformist and nonconformist. I'm a
Oh,
nonconformist. So if I get a 70 because my grammar sucks, I don't care. I passed. Conformists need to have an A. So they need to have the commas and the semicolons and all that stuff. And so that, whether they, and here's a funny thing, like whether they go on to higher learning and get graduate degrees and whatever, there are folks that don't have all of those extra credentials. But my goodness, if you misspell something or you don't use the appropriate apostrophes or whatever, they're going to let you know, right? And so for me, they fall in this conformist bucket. Whereas, and I think in the trades, if you have a nonconformist personality, you'll be more successful, because there is no one way to do something in the trades. In grammar, there is only one way to do it. When you're building, there's not one way, there's a lot of ways, and you got to figure it out. And so it's a good space for folks like that. Anyways, in terms of like the education, so here's a super nerdy example. Math. You said maths, and math is my favorite. I excelled at math because it made sense. It was very simple. 2 + 2 was 4 all the time, every time. Unless you ask Terrence Howard, but that's a different conversation. When I remember I was taking calculus in high school. I went to summer school, Steph. I paid with my own money to go to summer school so that I could take trigonometry and pre-cal, I think. Yeah. So that I could make sure I would take calculus my senior year in high school, because I wanted to say I took calculus. Anyhow, I remember in my calculus class, my Miss Patterson, poor Miss Patterson, I didn't take it seriously, right? I just did my work and I did enough to pass, and that was it. And she was giving me a hard time, and I'm like, Miss, like, who cares? Like, the only people that need to use calculus are calculus teachers. Like, this has no real world application. And I believed it at the time.
yeah, yeah.
Fast forward, I'm in apprenticeship. It was like my second or third year apprenticeship, and we're kind of studying thermodynamics. We're studying the way systems are designed, and I see the formula. I'm like, that's calculus. And I'm like, oh. And so I went back to Miss Patterson. I said, Miss, I was wrong. I'm in plumbing apprenticeship, and we freaking use calculus in the trades. And then another hard, like, first hands-on example, geometry, Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That is the formula I used over and over and over again to figure 45-degree offsets. In school, it was difficult for me to, like, what's the point? But when I had a problem in the field and I couldn't, like, you want to minimize the 90s because they restrict flow. So a 45-degree turn is less restriction on the flow of whatever it is. But calculating that precise measurement is the Pythagorean theorem. And so after putting my hands on the doing or the application of the stuff that we can learn in an education, in a formal setting, helped it stick for me. Am I way out in left field, Steph?
Of course you're not, but you know what? I mean, you're saying something to me that, I mean, you're giving this is my pew pew pew. This is the context. The problem with so much education is it is not put into the application and the context. So of course you're going to fall asleep in calculus class. Of course you're not going to have connected the other math ideas that you have to when you finally end up in a calculus class and understand contextually what does this have to do with anything.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's why you said that to her initially.
Yeah, I was being a pain. Well, here's
Yeah,
the other thing.
but you're the every student. You think you're the only student that's ever said that?
Probably not.
No.
Now let's talk about maybe some starting points for silos, right? Because I remember being in the super nerdy classes, you need to pay closer attention because if you don't, you're going to end up working construction. All right. If you don't pay attention and learn these things, your punishment is working construction. Now, I'm a freaking proud living proof that is not a bad thing. It's actually a damn amazing thing. So educators, I love them. They're awesome, beautiful people, severely underpaid, severely underappreciated. Their perspective of what a career in the construction industry is that it's bad, right? Like now, yes, it's hard on the body. It's very physical. You're going to sweat. You're going to freeze, all of those things. But for some people, that's a freaking adventure and they want that. And so then the question becomes, okay, and we're dealing with it right now, right? The labor shortage, there was a huge focus whenever it was. I mean, the labor shortage isn't a new thing. Back in 1995, when I decided to stick in apprenticeship and stick in plumbing, there was a labor shortage. I just was good at math and said, oh, in 10, 15 years, there's going to be fewer people doing this work, which means I'm going to make more money. So I did it. Now it's just continued to, that shortage has expanded. Anyways, there was a major focus in sending people to university to get higher education degrees, blah, blah, blah. The tides have turned. People are learning, like, I'm getting a degree and it's really not what they told me it was going to be. But part of the problem, it's not the problem, part of the problem, the silo is we have educators who the only way for them to do the thing that they do that brings them income was through formal accredited education. And so that's their only frame of reference.
But it's not just their frame of reference, though. Sorry for interrupting you, Jesse, but it's also their mentality. Yes. Because in order to become a teacher, they have to do this set of books and this set of books and learn this pedagogy and so on and so on and so on that leads them to their teacher certificate. So yes. It's a different, well, you riff on it. That's exactly what's different. It's mentality. That's all.
The only path that they know. And so they're not telling people don't go to the trades from a malicious perspective. They're trying to help, most of them. And the only path they know to success or to a certain quality of life is through that formal, is their own path. This is a natural thing. It's like me. I came up to the trades. Now I'm running my business. I do all kinds of content creation. So when people want direction from me, guess what I'm going to tell them? You should go into the trades and you should do this and you should, because I've been conditioned to, my conditions have helped me understand that this way is a phenomenal way. But where we can start demoing the divide is say, wait a minute, that worked for me, and that's not the only way. There are other paths And so let's explore and understand the other paths, not just for ourselves personally, but so that we can help other people understand that there are multiple paths to have the experience or the outcome that you want to achieve. And so, but again, silos. I feel like one of the silos that every single human being deals with and needs to become aware of is the silo that their experience, all the data that they have, is finite and ultra limited. It is not the truth for everybody. And so when I come to terms with the fact that what I've experienced, what I've seen, what I've learned is a little bitty micro dot of what is actually available for people to learn and experience, I can be more receptive. I can be more accepting, and I can get out of my own damn way and not create barriers between me and other people.
And I think all of that is valid, but where do we start solution making so that other people's experience, i.e. a teacher? So for example, you could easily, we won't, but take your income against a teacher's income, and you have exponentially blown that income out of the water. There are other factors in the value of the path of any skilled tradesperson. I keep talking about the path within the path. I mean, I think that, you're a great example of that. I think that Joel Hamilton is a great example of that, who started tying rebar when he was 19. And, that not only has he expanded into a full inside project manager, but he's also running his own show. So I think there's an education of the educators that has to happen. There is an education, in my opinion, of the guys that hold the bucks at the top of the building owners, which is another, I'll say, a level of culture. So let's get into that a little bit. Okay. So we talk about the building owners. Generally, we're talking about individuals and mostly conglomerates that have mega bucks, and they're in the business of refurbishing, restoring, and building from scratch large buildings.
Yep.
If not structures, if they happen to lean into the civil side of things. But the end result is that they sometimes, just like your teacher analogy about them being in a certain experience, it's no different than people that find themselves in that position, which further fragments the value chain. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm just going to muddy the water. How about that?
Get muddy. Right, it's muddy. It's already muddy.
It's super muddy. An interesting thing that I see. We got a comment.
Yeah, we do.
The only one source, my smart plan is the only one source of trusted truth. That's from Shelley. Woohoo! What's my smart plans?
Don't know.
Awesome. Good. Like, we got a comment. Thank you, Shelley. I'm sorry. I get rabbit.
No worries. Yeah.
So here's a thing. I used to be of the mindset that companies are bad. Companies are doing these evil things, or whatever. And I've decided for myself that that's a poor framework, because companies don't do anything. They're a brand. They're a tax ID number that money passes through.
Right. Yeah.
There are human beings within those organizations that are making the decisions, that are doing the things that value or undervalue other human beings. There are real life people that do things for nefarious reasons, or they do things for virtuous reasons.
Right.
And so when I think about, I mean, like straight up, when I was out running work, there was one GC that I hated working with them. Their contracts, and I'm not gonna. I honestly, I'll just say there's very few GCs that I've seen produce a contract that I think is amazing. Rather, I'll say there's none. But there was one that their damn contract was so much in their favor. There were so many pitfalls for me to fall into that I fell into them, and that's how I learned it. That being said, there was a couple of teams that I worked for that organization that we had the same contracts on, but the way that they treated me, the way they chose to behave and operate on that project was significantly different. And so, yes, I get the conglomerates and I get all of those things, but for me, it always comes down to the individuals and the way they choose to carry themselves within whatever constraints they are facing. What do you think about that?
Well, and I think that's true, but I think we also have to talk about why it seems to be the norm on your average construction site and why it is not the exception that, you know, that is this, that would say that you can find more general contractors than not about that.
Yes, I mean, so again, back to the human. This is, and I'm super biased to this, right? I always believe it's personal ownership. That's the way we cause change. Sure, policies and all that other stuff, but whatever. So I'm a human being, right? There was a time where I would make decisions contrary to what I believed because I needed to have my security.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to have my income, right? And so I think as human beings, we're driven by fundamental. I mean, if you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We need security, we need food, we need shelter. And if I have to behave in a certain way to maintain that and suppress maybe what I believe in, I've done it. And I know I'm not the only person that's done it. On the same note, we're also driven by status. We're also driven by shiny, fancy cars and all these sorts of things, which
Sure.
are super, super seductive.
Yeah.
Which many, and I've done it in my life. I did very stinky, crummy things to other human beings so that I could get my shiny, shiny things. And so,
not you.
believe it or not, Stephanie. And so, from my perspective, what I see is when folks are within we'll say a technical framework or within certain constraints that maybe take advantage or neglect a different group of people, and you can use that broadly or tightly, the individual is incentivized to comply and reinforce that. The nonconformist is going to say, fine, you pay your name is on my check, but I don't have to function. I don't have to chew people up and spit them out in order to meet the objective and fulfill my responsibilities. And so I think it is abnormal for human beings to put their own personal selves at risk for other people. And I think that's where a lot of this stuff starts and propagates. And I mean, think about Enron or any of these other nightmares out there. Is the social setting was such that this behavior was acceptable. And if you didn't conform with this behavior, you would be, you would stand out, and not in a good way. And so it's really a matter, in my head, I think it's a matter of self-preservation that creates these freaking really nasty situations that people are living through.
But I think that these things are, I mean, that we're talking about are also outside of construction. I mean, it really comes down to your values. I just want to address, Shelley is, adding a lot of comments. Shelley, I won't be adding you to today's live stream, but I would be happy to have a conversation with you outside of this and perhaps discuss having you on in this series as we develop things with Jesse. Obviously, you've got some fairly strong experience in this area. Contractors making more money stealing than they make building. I think we have to be really careful about what we say and how we say it. And I think, everybody's got a piece in this, and everybody has good and bad experiences.
Yes.
So, Jesse, before we came on today, we talked about the responsibility of, what that looks like. And who holds what responsibility up and down the value chain.
Yeah. So this is a fact. The systems within a business, and we'll just kind of scope it down to construction, right? The systems, processes, checks, methods, contracts, like all of that, policies, all of that stuff. The decision makers within the organization are the ones who are responsible for making that happen, right? Like that is their baby. That is their work to design those policies, design those procedures, the methods, the process, like that's their work. So from a responsibility perspective, it is those leaders within the organization that create that. Now, if they come into an organization where there's systems and processes that underserve the people doing the work, they don't they get a short period of time, short amount of runway to blame the previous administration, wink, wink. But at some point, it's your baby. Like, come on, man, pick up the slack and make it right, make it better. Now, I also know, well, let me ask you this, Steph. How many of the apps that you have on your phone did you read all of the terms and conditions before you clicked I agree?
Of course.
Zero, right?
Of course.
So
yeah.
Having these super beautiful, elaborate contracts and structures and policies and procedures and SOPs and all, like, they're important. But that does not drive behavior. And so the accountability, the ownership, rather, comes down to the individuals.
Well, we talk about that, but what I want to talk about is it's one thing to talk about accountability. How do you take, I'll say, the next generation of skilled tradespeopeople to understand what their role is, but not just their role on the job, this is why I want to run this series with you, so that we can connect the dots between the silos that make people understand what is your part in it. And if you were doing more of your part, meaning your values, how you show up, your respect, not just for the people you're working for, but understanding that, like it or not, the building owner that you're ultimately working for, that the GC is generally working for, that you are working for him, and that's why you have this job. The more that you understand the context for what we all are existing in, I think you're just better equipped to understand where your own boundaries are. You'll come to the job and, there'll be a day when materials won't show up, or the wrong thing was ordered, or estimating, got it wrong. And, this is no way is this, whatever, this siding's going to fly in this particular job situation. But at least you can understand how it's all connected.
Okay. So I have a couple thoughts, right? In one case, and I see a lot of people do this, that value stream from apprentice or installer to company or building owner, there's a million touch points, a million handoffs between the installer and, or maybe not, I shouldn't say handoffs, layers. We'll say layers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So expecting a direct, clear connection between the building owner and the installer is an unrealistic expectation. But I think that's what we do. We spend so much time trying to figure out if the owner did this, it would be better for the helper.
Yeah, yes.
And I think that's where we're missing it, because the issue is smaller than that. We got to zoom in. And so at every layer, where's the disconnection, or where's the connectivity? Where's the connectivity point so that we can reinforce it, so that you have this string of relationships that can keep taut with the appropriate amount of tension in the same direction for the same purpose. And so thinking about it from like, if owners did this, if GCs did this, if trades did this, if workforce did this, everything would be good. It's not. I mean, I wish it was that easy, but I don't think it is that easy. Now, because of all the other reasons I gave earlier, right? Self-preservation, ambition, ownership, different varying levels of ownership and accountability. So what I think, like, I have the solve, Stephanie, like for the labor shortage, I know how to solve it. You want to guess? Stop building. If you stop building, you have no labor shortage. But that's a problem, right? Wait a minute. What are you talking about? It will solve the problem. We won't have a labor shortage anymore. That's not reasonable. But we know that there are some owners that are phenomenal to work with. They care not only for their end user, they care for the construction staff. They have an interest in providing a meaningful experience to anybody that comes into contact with their stuff.
So I want to stop you for a second.
Okay.
Knowing in your head that exists and you've had that experience, explain a few details about what makes that a phenomenal experience and how do they relate with the rest of their value chain.
So I'll give a very as specific as I can. During the pandemic, there were several owners out there that were like, I don't give a shit. Y'all need to hit your schedule. That's on you. Lots and lots of them. I don't care if they're sick. I don't want to hear it. You got a schedule to meet, hit your schedule. That's probably the norm. There were a few that said, send everybody. There was one specifically that said, get people safe. And we are going to we're going to continue paying a smaller percentage of whatever that cost was in terms of labor and hours, whatever, for this period of time, so that we can keep those people here and engaged and ready for the project in case this thing clears in a few weeks. So they absorbed that cost. They decided to absorb the cost. They decided to make sure everybody was safe. And then they said, okay, 3 weeks have gone by. We don't know when this is going to end. So we can't afford to continue just paying people to be ready, but we can pay a smaller group, a select group, to start planning and strategizing how we can bring people back sooner within the requirements that we need for social distancing and this sort of thing. And they did that. And once they came up with a plan, like, this is the owner saying, this is what your charge is, GC. Came up, everybody got involved, the trades, okay, this is a plan. Okay, that sounds like an actionable plan. And they were able to get people back to work before everybody else was just either like, stay home or go do your damn job. I don't want to hear, stay 6 feet apart and then kind of like turn a blind eye. Like, they actually did something to make sure they were compliant and make sure that people were continued to work and make sure that they were in the safest conditions possible.
So how do you think you can foster more of that kind of behavior?
Simple. Vote with your feet. Right? So if I know as a craft worker, as a plumber, where I'm working with GC, or we'll start trade contract. I've worked with trade contractors at a couple companies in my past that it was it sucked bad. Like, it was just not great, right? It was designed to help people quit if they didn't have super, super thick skin. I left those companies. I found a company where there were people and there were systems in place to help people grow and thrive. I voted with my feet. So as a trade contractor, it's something I got to observe many, many times is there were some general contractors, the people on their teams, that we could make money. And we weren't cussing and yelling and threatening each other. And like it was a good environment. Sure, we'd have disputes, but we could make money, we could get work done. And the way they functioned and operated was like awesome. Then there were other contractors that we worked with that they were like, it sucked because they didn't know what the hell they were doing. So how does a trade contractor vote with their feet? Don't pursue work with those jerks. Like here's the question that I think every decision maker within an organization needs to be asking themselves. Does this client, does this prospect, this project, the way they function and operate, is it going to cause me to deviate from my values? When the answer is yes, don't bid on it, period. Right. And so as trade contractors, as we go finding those progressive leaders that know how to demonstrate appreciation, we give them preferred pricing. We give them preferred performance. And so what's going to happen then is those leaders, those people that are creating a space that values human beings and makes shit happen, because you got to do that too. It's not all lovey-dovey. You got to make stuff happen.
Right.
They're going to continue to get better pricing, which means they're going to pass on better pricing and a better experience to the owners. So they're going to grow market share. People are going to focus on those owners because there's owners out there that are jerks also, that I don't want to hear your bullshit. Just get the job done. I don't all that people-y stuff, whatever, get the job done. So as general contractors, why are you choosing to work with owners that cause you to deviate from your values? And I keep going to values because I'm not like a huge proponent of this. You got to have your mission, vision, value, because most of the time that's just freaking ugly ass wallpaper for most companies. But there are some that actually live by their values. I think his name's Garrett Moss, Herb Sargent. Like there's people on LinkedIn that clearly live and operate their business from a values perspective. And they are selective about who they do work with. And so big, broad answer to how do we start making the shift is stop working for butt heads. It sounds simple, but we can do it. Nobody is going to change until they have to. And if we continue pursuing work, it's like we're cannibalistic in the way that we pursue work, because we'll go submit a bid for somebody that we know is going to just wear us out. And we're going to do everything we can to submit a lower bid. So it's like, please give me the privilege of being abused by you. And we do it over and over and over again.
We do it, but I think this also to me rubs up against the whole idea of a business that's in business. They've got an overhead to meet. They've got debt to meet. So that also colors why it becomes this eat or be eaten machine that you just keep rinsing and repeating, and you're going to get the same bad results. So as a depth builder, I'm curious if you were to find yourself working with a contractor that said, Jesse, I need your help. Everything's effed up from the people relationships to the processes to our operations. What would you recommend? Where would you say, so they don't lose their shirt, they don't go under, they can still meet their payroll? What would you say is the first place for that to start? Because I think that's why the hamster wheel continues.
Yes. And so this will help people understand, like, if you want to call me, you got to be ready for this, because this is I'm not saying my way is the only way. I'm saying it's the only way I know how to do it. And so it's this, and I get this call often, Jess, we need some help. The bricklayer's way behind. We need some help with them. Or, it's always help us fix them. Jess, we need some help. Our middle management, they're not communicating, blah, blah, blah. So if somebody's asking for me to help fix somebody else.
Yeah.
That's generally the case. Where I start is evaluating the people that reached out to me. How are they functioning? So the question is really this: everyone is contributing to the outcome. Period. If you're calling me, you have something to do with the negative situation that you're experiencing. Period. You may not be aware of it. So my job now, I have an advantage because I don't have the problem of self-preservation. I'm not trying to get promoted within the organization. You can cut me off anytime you want if you don't like my speed. And so it's part of my responsibility is how do I become a trusted resource for the people, pointing out their blind spots, showing them how they're contributing to the problem, because this needs some tweaking too. While concurrently, I'm going to go and identify the loudest, most painful problem, the thing that got their attention at the beginning. So it's a concurrent approach to, okay, this thing stinks. Let's figure that out, or else we're not going to have a great situation. And while we're doing that, I'm going to tinker around, do some mind shifting with the decision makers out there so that they can not only achieve the outcome that they want, but they can sustain that going forward and expand that further into the rest of their operations.
Okay, so I love the word concurrent. It has to be concurrent. So when you are going into a situation like this and you, first of all, deal with the group where they have to sort of turn it back on themselves and understand their piece in it, their responsibility in it, their accountability in it, what then how are you able to alleviate their cynicism, I'll say, as resolving this concurrently, moving up the value chain? I don't want to use up and down, but whatever. I think people get it.
Yep.
So are you working with them in tandem, these two groups?
It's a secret.
It's a secret.
No, I'm going to tell you, but just don't tell anybody else, Steph. My favorite approach is this. Okay, we got a business problem. We need help solving the problem. Typically, the way we solve problems is we SWAT at symptoms. We react to the thing that's happening right now. There's so many people in construction that we are just, I'm a problem solver, but we solve the same problem over and over on Project X. And then we continue to solve that problem on Project Y and Project Z. So if we're solving the same problem, have we really solved the problem? No. All we did was put a Band-Aid on it. So what my favorite approach is, let's address the problem as a learning experience. The problem now becomes the venue to help people build new skills in terms of fact-based problem solving, understanding the problem at a deeper level, so that whatever you do actually sticks and the problem goes away. Now, in order to do that, I'm not going out there to understand the problem, Steph. You and I are going out there, and we're going to study it, and we're going to be present to witness the funkiness, the disconnects, the weird wonkiness, because you have all the influence. I don't. I'm just some weirdo that got invited to the damn job. And because you have all the influence, and now beyond looking at the dashboard, you went out there, and rather, I took you out there to see what was actually happening, how they are contributing to the problem, and how you are contributing to the problem. It's very easy to say, now I see. We need to change this. And so I'll give you a real example. One project, we went out there, the general superintendent for the GC and the general superintendent for the trade. They were not friends, right? They were fighting, but we were doing this problem solving effort. So we came across this situation where the floors were overstocked with material because the GC said, you better ship all your stuff. We're not waiting. Get your material here. Well, anyways, what was happening is the install team couldn't install the things at the rate they needed to meet the schedule. right?
Yes.
And so when we went out there to actually see what the hell was happening, what we discovered was part of the reason, not the reason, part of the reason was the overstocking on the job site. That the GC said, I want it. And so the trade was like, bro, like, here's the thing. It's so overstocked, so congested that the equipment we need to like be moving constantly can't move. So GC said, crap, that was my fault. I made that call. You told me, I didn't listen. Stop shipping material, let the equipment get ahead of the material, and then ship the material out. And so in that little exchange, the relationships were mended, and we began to understand, like, oh, we're all contributing to this problem, but we can't see because we stay distracted in all the other things that are pulling at our attention, right? And so getting out there to get mud on your boots and get the dirty details on your hands is the way I help people overcome those situations. And ideally, I shift their brain just a little bit so they naturally do that going forward.
So you're just making them aware, literally and visually, of their part in it. And of course, a build is it's a physical thing. So that's why, having a conversation about what's not working on the project in the back office is not helpful. It's not helpful enough. It's identifying, it's recognizing it.
Yes.
But if you're really going to isolate where the lock jams are, where the politics is, where the leaders are on site that are perpetuating these behaviors, you have to go and see it in action.
Yes.
And that begins to tear down silos. So
Yes.
on that note, I want to sort of get ready, or at least prime our audience, I hope, as they follow along with this. I, more on the research element of who's all involved in the value chain. What do you think, based on your experience, is the best way to start approaching these various silos? And I'm going to use my favorite word of the day, concurrently join them together using real life scenarios, whether it's from the perspective of the electrical trade or the cement, doesn't matter what it is, but everybody, I think, in a real way has to understand, okay, I'm a project manager, and I'm a project manager on mechanical projects and commercial projects. And, for whatever kind of size, I'll use Heath as an example, installing EV utility situations in large manufacturing factories, as an example. I want to be able to take real use cases and you sort of take people through how you would apply the breaking down of the silos as we go through. What do you think? What do you want to do?
You know me, I'm up for whatever. Here's something as we go forward. Like, I'm good with that. Like, yeah, let's attack it. Let's play with it. The one thing that's like super, super critical. Oh, look at that. I got a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah, you did.
Is gaining agreement on the problem. Like, that's the ultimate. I'm going to tell you straight up, I am completely useless in helping a team if they can't at least agree on the problem. And so I say that, whereas if you have an organization or a team that is saying everything's fine, and you're the only person that knows it isn't or believes it isn't, you're going to make zero progress until you gain agreement on the problem. And so that's the social piece of demoing these silos, is gain agreement on the problem. if you don't gain agreement on the problem, you're just going to be spinning your wheels and accusing and pointing fingers and all the rest of the stuff. So in terms of like picking apart real situations, I'm up for it. And I think it would be helpful or interesting for people to like maybe submit, comment, call, share, whatever, a situation that they can sanitize it, right? Take the names out, take the comment, but a real situation that they've dealt with or they've dealt with over and over again. And we could pick that apart and have a dialogue, you and I and them in the chat, or bring them up, like whatever. I think there's a lot of opportunity because it's very difficult. Rather, I don't think it'll be helpful for people, for the viewers out there in the Omniverse, if it's too general. Like if we're going to get
I
into
agree.
right?
I agree. Yes, absolutely.
If we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of it, it needs to be super, super specific, like for real situation with some specific details so that we can get into it. Because generalities, shit, you can go to YouTube and search
that's exactly, that's why, you know, I wanted to partner with you on this, because you can take people through and down these specific rabbit holes that are unlike other rabbit holes to contextualize. And I mean, you called out to me the first step for us is agree on the problem. So in our next session, which is we've scheduled now for November the 1st, we will talk about a particular scenario. And the first thing we're going to do is figure out what did they agree was the problem. And then we'll take it from there. Sound like a plan?
Love it. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So that's, I think that's a wrap for us. We're going to do our best to recirculate today's recording, and you know, we'll stay in touch. Shelley, I appreciate all your comments, but we will have a conversation, you know, to offline, and see where Smart Plans fits in any of this conversation moving forward. But certainly Jesse and I will continue what we're doing. And he's got an expression, demo the divide, that he uses a lot. And that's what we're trying to do is it doesn't matter what the tool is. Tools, you know, whether it's a data collection tool, whether it's a level, whether it's a hammer, whether it's an excavator, they're all part of what should make that project more satisfactory for the participants involved, and dare I say, the margins. I mean, I don't think you can ever get away from the fact that people build buildings for a reason, and that is to drive revenue. So I don't think we can ever take our eye off of that. That's why I want the building owner. And when you talk about the concurrent relationships, yes, you're perhaps working more at the skilled trade level and then with their direct reports or who they report into. But ultimately, it is the owner that decided anything was going to be built. And I like you. So then the other takeaway I say is you say vote with your feet. If you don't like that situation and there is a labor shortage, then vote with your feet to the degree that you can. And I also think, Jesse, that's another thing that we have to do a better job of, is having those guardrails so that they can vote with their feet.
Yes.
Because you said unrealistically, stop building, right? That's ultimately what you could do.
Yes.
But we have to figure out the paths so that we're not stopping to build, but we're giving people choices in shitty situations.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
All right, sir. That's a wrap. I'll see you on the other side just for a minute. And thanks everybody for your participation and your interest and your listening and your comments. And we'll see you November the 1st for the next one. Take care.
Boom.